actually goes as far as Egypt.
As ancient Egypt, yes.
And of course that's Israel and Egypt, you see, and the Presbyterians regard themselves as the new Israelites. So that's why Thomson has this vast backward-looking skill.
Thomson was fascinated by the past, but he couldn't have predicted the future. An elder with the United Presbyterians, he worshipped at Caledonia Road Church until his death. But a century later, the church fell into disuse as the Gorbals were cleared. Taken over by the council, it was allowed to fall into disrepair. In 1965, the empty building was torched by vandals.
Caledonia Road Church is a survivor of an earlier, perhaps greater period in Glasgow's history. And its creator might have taken some consolation from the fact that despite everything, this evocative ruin still stands, still speaks.
At the Mitchell Library, there are other tantalising relics of Thomson's first great Greek-style building. I'm meeting architect Fiona Sinclair to take a look at them.
Ooh, what's this?
Oh, these are lovely.
Aren't they?
What we have here are some of the surviving drawings of Alexander Thomson's Caledonia Road Church.
Now, the first thing I noticed about that is it's got no tower.
It's remarkable, actually. I imagine that this was his initial attempt to design a church, and then it's entirely possible that he felt that it required more of a landmark feature, a gateway to from the south into the city.
Almost like a beacon.
Exactly,
in a sense, yeah.
Exactly. Again, this is a beautiful drawing, which clearly shows that he was working through a series of design ideas.
That's shorter than that one,
Yes,
isn't it?
it's far dumpier than
Yeah.
as built, and quite different on top.
Not quite as elegant, but still pretty stunning,
No, it's
isn't it?
still pretty stunning. And this lovely drawing, this is a working drawing. We're so lucky to have this. When the tower's actually on the other side of the...
So it is, he's moved it over.
So
Oh,
he was...
what are these there?
These are fabulous. These are little sketches.
Are they his doodles?
I think they are.
It's Thomson's
they're
doodles.
absolutely beautiful. This is what makes this drawing particularly important.
God, done by the great man himself. What was his work practice like, Fiona? Any idea?
He wasn't greatly interested in running the business.
Yeah.
He wasn't terribly punctual, apparently, which annoyed his clients. But once he did settle down, once he actually really began to concentrate, there was no one more committed. No one more committed to the ideal, and no one more committed to producing something that was as perfect as he could make it.
The mid-1850s were a time of intense creativity for Thomson. But there was also a terrible heartbreak that makes his achievements seem all the more astonishing.
In 1854, a waterborne cholera epidemic struck Glasgow. It eventually killed thousands of people, including 4 of Thomson's young children: Agnes, Jean, George, and Alexander.
But somehow Thomson kept going, kept creating. Faith, family, friendships and work. Always the work to carry him through. Out of tragedy came this triumph. Homewood House, Thomson's finest villa. Completed in 1858, this astonishing building still takes your breath away. Designed for the wealthy Cathcart papermaker James Cooper, it was more than a home. It was a show home, built to entertain and impress clients.
Ah, this is going to be a treat.
Today, Homewood is run by the National Trust for Scotland, and volunteer Ian McGilvery is going to give me a tour.
So I'm taking you, David, into the parlour.
It's a beautiful room.
It's the family room. The circular window, Thomson says in his little notes, is the ideal place for the lady to do her sewing, which is what ladies were supposed to do, of course. But when children came, this was their favourite room. For as you can see, a circular curtain track, and you can imagine how children would use that 360 degrees.
Almost like you're creating a little theatre for
Exactly
them.
so, yes, yes.
But Ian, this wasn't just a family home, was it? It was more than that.
Thomson designed a house of two halves. It's a house for a family to grow up in, and it's a house to entertain in. It's corporate entertaining in style. Shall we go and have a look?
Yes, please.
We'll just go round the corner.
Like an Aladdin's cave.
Right, come away into the dining room, David, into a much taller, additional stories.
Now this is very different.
And behind you, the focus of the room, the big white marble altarpiece, in bits at the moment, but being recreated so that even a bowl of spuds would steam up like a sacrifice to the gods from Greece, stirring up the Trojan Wars in the frieze all around your head.
Yes, and you've got the light coming from above.
And you've got the biggest sheets of plate glass in Europe at the other side. So the room is filled with light. It's very theatrical, isn't it?
It is very theatrical.
Yes. So it's the theatre of war, the theatre of architecture, the theatre of food. So let's come up the stairs. And you're coming into light. It's coming out of darkness into light. That's again the drama of the house.
So beautiful.
And here we come into the drawing room, which is a superb room, even in its present state. Now this was the second half of the entertainment suite. You'd be brought up after lunch for your coffee and your liqueurs, and probably the signing of the contract. So this was a very important room in the corporate entertainment game. And you can imagine the effect it would have on somebody coming up.
Well, if you're sitting imbibing in a beautiful living work of art, of course you would sign on the dotted line straight away, wouldn't you?
One of the incredible things about Homewood House is that it survived at all. Like other Thomson buildings over the years, it's been altered, knocked about, neglected. That it still stands is thanks to a small band of enthusiasts, including architectural historian Professor Gavin Stamp, who in 1991 began a campaign to save Homewood.
Now, I'm highly critical of the civic administrations in this city, decade after decade, who let its architectural heritage go to ruin, disappear into the mists of time. How difficult a challenge was it?
Well, it was difficult because it was then occupied by an order of nuns who were selling up, and a developer had an option on it, and the plan was to cover the grounds with blocks of flats. Its future was uncertain, so we felt that it ought to be rescued and ought to be in the hands of an organisation that could look after it, like the National Trust for Scotland. It's wonderful to come here now and see the restoration that's slowly going ahead.
Now, Gavin, what is the particular genius of this building?
This is the first picturesque Grecian villa. By that I mean that it's asymmetrical. It's a building to be seen from various angles. Before this, Grecian villas tended to be precisely symmetrical. Thomson's asymmetrical villas, you see it down at Cove and Crillcregan, they tend to be Italianate, or they're Gothic, or they're baronial. But having found his language, the Greek, hence his nickname, Greek Thomson, used it in a quite new way, and making this an asymmetrical Grecian villa, the first of its kind.
Homewood House is a breakthrough building, a brilliant fusion of different styles. Thomson broke down the old, rigid constraints of Greek Revival architecture and introduced a romantic freedom and honesty. he hides nothing. Look at the building from the outside and you understand what's inside.
Homewood House is an astonishing, beautiful, radical one-off. And of course it was built for a wealthy client. But Thomson was no rich man's architect. He had democratic ambitions and a burning desire to give architectural dignity to everyone, no matter what their station.
Industrial Glasgow was synonymous with tenements, a kind of urban housing practically unknown in England, but familiar in Berlin, Barcelona, and New York. And Thomson designed tenements too. Built in 1857, in what were then green fields along Paisley Road West, Walmer Crescent is a hidden gem.
It's a tenement, but a tenement on a grand, even heroic scale.
Thomson devoted as much attention to tenements like Walmer Crescent as he did to his more exclusive villas and terraces. In a brilliant architectural illusion, he built a gentle curve into the bold, blocky facade. Brenda Lillicrap lives on Walmer Crescent and has researched the history of this pioneering building.
Brenda, what attracted people here in the first place? Because you were out in the sticks, you were in the countryside, you were not in the heart of the city.
You were, so I think it must have been the adverts that were run in the Glasgow Herald at the time. So there's copies of two typical ones there which really tout the place.
To let, with immediate entry, several houses from 6 to 9 apartments, each beautifully situated facing the south and commanding an extensive view of the country around, are fitted with every convenience for a genteel family. The situation is dry and airy.
These were big, well-appointed residences when they were built, although they were flats. I mean, they had internal toilets, which was very unusual at the time.
You say, you know, they're very sizable apartments. Do they have servants' quarters?
No, well, they didn't have servants' quarters, and there was only, in the upper flats, just an alcove in the kitchen. But in the first census, after the building was occupied, so 1861, practically every household had servants. The big flats, the ground floor and basement, would typically have 3 servants, and the upper flats have 1 or 2, and you could have 12 people living in one of the big flats and 8, 9, 10 living in one of the upper flats. They were much more crowded than we are now, even though they were obviously doing quite well.
While the residents of an upmarket tenement like Walmer Crescent shared relatively spacious, healthy conditions, it was a different experience for the very poorest. The population of Glasgow quadrupled between 1800 and 1850. Its overcrowded slums became notorious as the worst in Europe.
I have seen wretchedness in some of its worst phases, both here and upon the continent. But until I visited the wines of Glasgow, I did not believe that so much crime, misery and disease could exist in any civilized country. In the lower lodging houses, 10, 12, sometimes 20 persons of both sexes, all ages, and various degrees of nakedness, sleep indiscriminately huddled together upon the floor. These dwellings are usually so damp, filthy and ruinous that no one could wish to keep his horse in one of them.